Hi all, so we leave the group stages behind and we're now into the quarterfinals of the Chessable Masters, and tonight I'll show you a game between Magnus Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana. The final 8 is a knockout where each match is played as best of 3 sets, where each set consists of 4 rapid games. If the match ends in 2-2, then 2 blitz games will be played and followed if necessary by an Armageddon. So the time control for the rapid games is 15 minutes with a 10-second increment for move 1. The blitz games are 5 minutes with a 3-second increment. And for Armageddon, white gets 5 minutes and black 4, but a draw counts as a win for black. So it's the third game of their first set. Yes, so we have Magnus who won the first 2 games, and Caruana has to win the next 2 games to force a blitz match. So can he do it? Let's get it started. So we have Carlsen with the white pieces opening with e4. We have c5, the Sicilian. Knight to f3, d6, and now bishop to b5. We have the Moscow variation. We have knight to c6, and now castles. Bishop to d7, and we have rook to e1. Knight to f6, and now h3 is played, just preventing any bishops or knight to go to that square. We have a6 now by Fabi, and the bishop retreats to f1. And this is a critical moment in the game. While you could play something like, e5, e6, or maybe g6 and try and fianchetto the dark square bishop, Fabi actually plays g5 here, which shows you he is ready to fight. And we need to just look at this position, because what happens if white takes the pawn? Can you actually take it? Well, what will happen if you run into some trouble? For example, if rook to g8 and you retreat the knight, then you get bishop to h3, and yeah, this is just a better position for black. But you could also play something like d4, and if you take into to defend the knight on g5, and then you can take c3 now, and perhaps you can take here with a nice position for white, but still with the threat of this. So if black maybe kicks the knight away, then still you get this position, which is just maybe it's equal, but it's just very unpleasant for white, in my view. So Magnus didn't take the pawn, but actually played g4 now, attacking the pawn also with the bishop. We have g4 now by Magnus, really trying to force this file open. And now you could take it maybe, or play maybe a knight to g5, but here Magnus played actually d5, attacking the knight. Caruana takes an f3, Carlsen takes an c6, bishop takes c6, and queen to f3. So what this has accomplished is that white's pawn structure is just fully intact here on the queen side. Um, we have black with a semi-open file on the G, but he also has no more option to castle either king side or queen side. Well, in theory he could, but both sides they will be compromised with a weakened pawn structure. So we have knight to e7 by Fabi, and Carlsen replies with knight to f3. We have e6 now, just making sure this square and this square is protected, fighting for the center. And we have queen to g3. We have queen to e7, and this is actually a mistake by Fabi, which allowed for a very nice trick. And there are possibilities here to maybe play a bishop f4, and maybe play bishop g5. The thing is, you have a rook here, and this line is this file looks very um, juicy, right? So without much thought, Carlsen just plays knight to d5. It looks it looks awesome because you cannot take. If you take with the pawn, well, bad things are gonna happen. You have to play bishop to g5 to defend the rook, and after f6 you take here, and you have to block with the knight, and after f4 you're gonna lose this knight. So it's you cannot take it with the pawn. So Fabi took with the bishop, and after you take the bishop, now plays e5, um, trying to hold on to this file. We have b4 now by Magnus. The queen side is busted, so it's time to bust open the queen side. We have takes on b4, rook to b1, a5, and now just a3, attacking the pawn. With f5 now, getting some counterplay and controlling the center. And now takes and on b4, and we have a4. You don't want to take here because as a rook to b4, this is under attack. You'll got the bishop to b5. It gives white a bit much counterplay here. So a4, bishop to b5, bishop to g7, and rook to a1, preparing to win back the pawn. And now castles by black. It's it's the best he can do. White's white's pieces are mostly focused on the queen side of the board, so it makes sense that you want to put your king away from the center to safety on the king side. If rook to takes a4, rook a to c8, and now rook a7, just pounding on the attack. With knight to f6 now, attacking the pawn and defending by with c4. And if you look at this position, White's position is just beautiful. We have the bishop pair. We have a very nice attack going on here on the 7th rank and on the g file. This bishop can come to g6. This bishop is controlling here, and even maybe with some ideas that maybe he can at some point get to a square like e6. There's just so many possibilities here for Magnus. So Fabi plays king to h1, just unpinning this bishop, and we have queen to g5 now. We have queen to c7, and queen takes f5, and queen takes d5. So yeah, Magnus took the pawn, and Fabi took the pawn back with a tempo on the queen, and then queen to d7. And here it's a tricky position because white just threatens to take the pawn here, and then there will be an unstoppable attack on g7 or h8 threatening checkmate with your queen is just in the way here. Um, but you don't want to trade queens because you're a pawn down, you have a worse position, so you want to fit in the counterplay. So what about you play something like queen to b6, then you attack the rook and also threaten to queen takes f2. So for example, if white now takes the pawn and threatening here checkmate, then black gets at least the queen to takes f2 in, and after king to h2, there is some sort of counterplay. It can maybe stop the attack like this with takes, and it's at least black is fighting back in this position. But if the problem is after queen to b6, white doesn't have to play the rook here, but instead he can play the bishop to e3. And after this move, uh, black can take, but then this is deadly. Then rook to b7 is deadly because now there is no check and there is no way to defend this without sacrificing the queen. So queen to b6 just isn't possible. And with the threats looming in the horizon, so to say, Fabi decides to take the queen. We have bishop takes d7, and now rook to c4, but we have bishop to e6 now. Rook to d4, and then we have a trade in the center, and Magnus takes the pawn on b7. So Magnus' king is still safe. He is a pawn up, um, and this pawn, well, he cannot go this way, but it looks like he can have a free pass. So Fabi will have to think of something to stop this pawn. So he plays rook to d3, and now bishop to e3. Finally, that bishop is off the c1 square. Yes, it hadn't moved yet. And with this bishop here, he's now preparing to move this pawn here. And also with the dark square, bishop is also looking at b8. So at some point when the pawn comes to a7, you can maybe put the bishop here and queen your pawn. So Fabi tries to get some counterplay and plays d5, and now we have rook to bishop to c5, attacking the rook, and rook to c8. We have b5 now, and this looks like, hey, isn't just hanging a piece, but black has some severe back rank issues. So, for example, if black takes, you get a rook to b8. Now the only way to block it is with the bishop, and after takes and check, uh, white is actually here in a very strong position with maybe, for example, this, and this pawn is still threatening to queen. So yeah, b5 is just it's just a way to advance the pawn faster. So we have e4 now by Fabi, and b6 by Magnus. Just continuing his plan. Still, the rook is hanging, or the bishop is hanging, but it's no threat because you will win the other bishop. So rook to c3 now, and now of course you have to move the bishop because now it's under attack twice, and we have now just takes on g7. We have takes on c4, and now rook to d7, saying, okay, maybe I will not defend this pawn, but if you take this pawn, I will actually take the d pawn. So rook to b5, b7 now, rook to b8, and now rook to d1. Just saying, okay, you can have this pawn, and I will take that pawn. So we have rook takes b7, and takes on d5. So we have another capture fast here. And now the king trying to get some activity to g7. And we have rook to e5 now, and defending the pawn and rook to b4. We have g4 and king to f6. We have rook to h5 now, attacking the pawn, and we have rook to b7 defending. King to g2, and rook to e7 now, getting a rook behind the pawn, always a good idea, and king to f1. So now we have this structure where these pawns are nicely defended by the rook, and it's yeah. How can Magnus actually break through here? We have king to g6 now, and king to e2, maybe with ideas of king to e3 and trying to win this pawn somehow like this. We have rook to f7, now preventing the rook here, but now just rook to e5, attacking the pawn. We have rook to f4, defending, and now rook to e6. If you want to defend like this, you'll just run into rook to f3, and after takes, this is actually a draw. So Magnus didn't do that. He played rook to e6, king to g5, and now rook to e5, king to g6, rook to e6, king to g5, rook to e5, and king to g6, and the game was drawn by a threefold repetition. So it's incredible that it was a draw in the end. Magnus didn't need to win. A draw for him was enough to win this leg. And I just thought it was a fantastic game to show Fabi just trying to, playing g5 in the opening, trying to get some attack in. but was just completely overwhelmed on the queen side of the board, and yeah, really did well to hold out on a draw here. So all in all, I think it was a great game. I hope you enjoyed it too. If you did, please do like it, comment, and please subscribe. It will really help me to grow my channel. And I will be with you soon again with another match of the Chessable Masters. Thank you so much for watching.